Hi, and you're very welcome to today's Saturday session for Leave Insert Biology, and our focus for today is going to be the excretory system. Now, the first keyword we're going to look at today is the idea of homeostasis, and homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment in our bodies. Okay, so a couple of examples of this will be the regulation of water within the body. So we're going to talk about the idea of water being taken in and water leaving our body. So how do we take water in? Well, we do this through food and drink, and also in cellular reactions such as respiration as well. Okay, how do we actually lose water, or how does water lose our bodies? We can do this through the lungs, we can do this through the skin if we are sweating, and also through the kidneys as well. And we're going to focus on all of those today, see how we can actually maintain this environment of water inside our bodies. So we're just going to have a look at how water can actually be lost from the body. So we're going to look at 4 different organs of excretion and the excretory products associated with those. Now the kidneys we've already mentioned, but how water is lost through the body here is through urine. Digestive system will be through bile pigments. The skin will be through sweat. So if you were working out, let's say going for a run, whatever it might be, and you were too hot and your body was trying to cool down, we would release sweat through our skin. This is water being lost from our body. And then for the lungs, we'd have water vapor and carbon dioxide, and this will be in the composition of exhaled air if we were breathing out. Now, we've had a look at examples of excretion, but what do we actually mean by excretion in all of these examples? So excretion is the removal of waste products of metabolism from the body. And the excretory system plays a massive role in homeostasis, which we just seen. 1, by maintaining the composition of an organism's fluids, water being 1. So this includes fluid balance and fluid chemistry. And it also plays a role in homeostasis by preventing the accumulation of poisonous wastes which might interfere with the metabolism. So it has 2 roles, okay? The composition of an organism's fluids, but also prevents the accumulation of poisonous waste as well, okay? The removal of waste, that's exactly what we're trying to do as part of excretion. So this is going to give us an overview of the excretory system and a couple of the different organs of excretion that are involved within it as well. So if we have a look at the liver up here, the liver is responsible for 2 different things here. It can be the deamination of amino acids and also the breakdown of nucleic acids. So if we focus first of all on deamination of amino acids, urea is going to be one of the waste products there. That urea, at the kidneys, could be excreted through urine. Very similar up here for the breakdown of nucleic acids. One of the waste products from that is uric acid. The kidneys will be responsible for releasing that from the body through urine. Okay, we want to eliminate those waste products from our body. That's excretion. The kidneys are responsible for that. If we have a look over here, all of the cells inside our body will undergo respiration, the release of energy from food. A couple of the byproducts from this would be water and carbon dioxide. Now, water could be released through urine along with the urea and the uric acid. Okay, the kidneys being responsible for that. Or it can be released by the skin, okay, through sweat, which is what we have down here. Or again, this water could be released from the body or removed from the body through the lungs along with carbon dioxide as water vapor. Carbon dioxide obviously leaving as carbon dioxide because again, water and carbon dioxide are byproducts of respiration. Okay, so that's kind of just a brief overview of the excretory system. We can see there the kidneys, the skin and the lungs, massively important in terms of excretion and the removal of waste from our bodies. Now, we mentioned already the organs of excretion, just to focus on them a little bit here. The main waste products that we want to try and eliminate from our body are water, carbon dioxide, and then nitrogenous or nitrogen containing wastes. The lungs will remove carbon dioxide and water, that's from respiration. The skin will excrete water and some salt, that's through sweat. And the kidneys will remove most of the rest, and this includes the urea. Okay, that's what we're looking that's one of the byproducts of the liver doing its job. Okay, the kidneys are going to remove most of the rest. Water will be included in this as well as urea and uric acid. Now we're just going to focus a little bit here on water first of all. So we can see here osmoregulation. So anything with osmo in it, we're going to be referring to water, again like osmosis is referring to water, but kidneys can control water content, salt concentration and pH concentration within the body. Okay, how do they actually do this? Well, it's actually by varying the amount of water and salt in urine or producing urine that is less or more acidic. Okay, kidneys being responsible for this. This ensures that plasma has the same concentration as normal body cells, allowing osmosis to occur. Okay. Temperature regulation then. Temperature influences the rate of enzyme-controlled reactions that sustain life. So all of the metabolic reactions that are taking place inside our body are influenced by temperature. Some of them are not going to work as efficiently if our temperature is too high or too low. Okay. A couple of examples of this that might be more suited to more extreme conditions will be endotherms or warm-blooded animals. They generate their own heat from their own metabolic heat, so these will be mammals and birds, whereas ectotherms, they're cold-blooded, they obtain heat from the environment. Examples there being fish and reptiles. Okay, temperature regulation has to happen in both of these. Obviously, as mammals, we don't want to get too hot, so we regulate our own temperature, possibly by sweating, whereas ectotherms, they need to obtain heat, so their behaviour might change to make sure that they're situating themselves in a place where they are going to receive sunlight, okay, because they need to obtain their heat from the external environment. Now we're going to focus on the skin for the next couple of minutes. The skin, responsible for maintaining temperature, regulates body temperature. Normal body temperature being about 37 degrees Celsius. So if you were sick, maybe you had a fever, your temperature might go a little bit above this. That's your body's natural protection, trying to kill off maybe any bacteria that might be in your body, whatever that might be. Okay, we don't want our temperature to go too high or too low, because it is going to affect the metabolic reactions that are taking place in our body. They're not going to work as well if the temperature is too much higher or too much lower than 37 degrees Celsius. The skin also has a role as an excretory organ, so it does remove sweat from our bodies. If we are working out again, we need to cool down, so sweat will be released from the body. But it can also help when we are cold as well, and this is really, really important when we look at skin, the structure of skin in the next couple of minutes. The skin has a hair erector muscle, and what this will actually do is it will contract and will pull the hair into an upright position on your body, and this can then try and trap heat to help insulate the skin. So if you do ever feel like you are getting cold, if you have a look at the hairs on your arms, sometimes when you are cold they will stand up, because what they're trying to do is to trap heat to make you a little bit warmer. Okay, so the skin, yes, it is hugely important as an excretory organ, but it does actually help as well when we're cold. So this is the structure of skin, and I'm just going to mention at this point as well that this is actually hugely important for your final Leaving Cert Biology exam. It is quite a common exam question to come up to either draw the structure of the skin, or where you'll be given the diagram and you'll be asked to label individual components of the skin. So if we have a look at a couple of the examples here, we can see here that we've two layers along the left hand side. This upper layer here is the epidermis. Okay, this lower layer more towards the inside is known as the dermis. Okay, this is the hair we were talking about. So this hair is currently standing up, so this person possibly is cold, because the erector muscle, which we have here, is contracting that hair, making it stand upright so that it can trap air to try and keep us warm. Okay, so the hair controlled by the hair erector muscle. We do have sense receptors as well, so these are responsible for us sensing things. Okay, so if you think of your nervous system, they're hugely important for that. We have our sebaceous gland. We have our sweat pores, so this is one of the pores where sweat will be released. We have our sweat duct, that's what the sweat is going to travel in, and we do have our sweat glands as well. We have a layer of fat tissue underneath the skin as well. This is known as the adipose tissue. And we can see here we actually have a rich network of blood vessels here as well. So we do have our arterioles, and we do have our net of capillaries there as well. Okay, so that's the structure of the skin. Really, really important that we know that. Just to focus a little bit more on what a couple of these do as well. The first of which is the epidermis. Now we've seen in the last slide that the epidermis was the outer layer of the skin, and this is where the outer cells will die and are shed as skin flakes. Okay, we constantly have a new layer of skin being formed. New cells will be pushed through, so we have our granular layer, which is the layer that's towards the centre. These are the new cells that are going to come through. They produce a waterproof seal called keratin. So keratin is a protein that's found in your hair, your skin and your nails, and these cells will become hard or cornified. We then have our Malpighian layer, so this is constantly producing new cells via mitosis. So just a quick recap of mitosis. Start off with one parent cell, and eventually we form two identical daughter cells. Okay, so this Malpighian layer in here, that's constantly producing the new cells. Eventually they will come up and become the granular layer, and then they will eventually come up and they will be the outer layer. Okay, so we constantly have new skin cells being produced. Now we do have specialized cell within the Malpighian layer that actually produce these brown-black pigments called melanin. You've probably heard of it before. So if you think of freckles that might be on your face, these are areas of concentrated melanin. Okay, they're the pigmentation. And what melanin does is it protects our skin from UV rays from the sun. Okay, so we've looked at the epidermis layer. We're now going to look at the dermis layer. This is located inside the epidermis, and we can see this down here in the diagram. Epidermis outside layer, dermis more towards the center. This consists of connective tissue and a strengthening protein called collagen. Okay, this is the layer that contains the sweat glands and hair follicles as well. So we can see the sweat glands in here, and we can see the hair follicle is going to be here. Okay, again, the hair erector muscle, which you can see just here, this is what will contract if we are a little bit too cold. will pull the hair up to make sure that it's standing upright so it can trap air to keep us warm. Okay, but for this, the dermis layer, this is more towards the center inside the epidermis layer, connective tissue, sweat glands, hair follicles. This is all here. Now, functions of the skin, what does it actually do? One of them being protection. So if you think of the epidermis, the outer layer, this acts as a barrier to pathogens. So if you ever were to get a wound on yourself, this is why platelets will go and clot the area as soon as possible to stop any pathogens from getting in. Okay, that's our epidermis. The dermis, more towards the inside, this protects organs from damage. We have our melanin, that's helping to protect us from UV rays, that's the area of pigmentation. And then we do have our sebum as well. So sebum is what keeps our hair moist and flexible, and it prevents our skin from drying up as well. Okay, so that's what we have in here in the sebaceous gland, that's the sebum. Some more functions of the skin, vitamin D production. Obviously, as Irish people, we don't obviously get a huge amount of sunlight, but what sunlight is actually what helps us make vitamin D. We may have to take vitamin D supplements to make sure that we're getting enough vitamin D. Other functions of skin include fat storage. This would take place within the adipose tissue. It is a sense organ for us as well. So for example, if we were to touch something hot, the sense receptors maybe in our fingertips or near our skin would let us know and it would pull ourselves away. That means it's working with the nervous system. It is responsible for excretion as well, obviously through sweat, and temperature regulation as well. And we've mentioned a couple of examples of this already, especially around if we were too cold, how the erector muscle will pull the hair upright to make sure that we're trapping air to keep us warm. Okay, so we're going to focus now on how the skin is responsible for temperature regulation. We've mentioned a couple of times already about what happens in cold temperatures when we're cold and the hair stands up, but we do want to also have a look at hot conditions as well. So in cold conditions, if you were to walk outside the door today and it was maybe -1, -2 degrees, what's your body going to do to help us with that? So blood is going to leave the surface layers, okay, it's going to go more towards the inside, and it's going to flow beneath the adipose tissue. So the fat tissue is going to be the one that's, I suppose, more towards the outside of our body, and this is going to help to insulate us. This means that less heat is lost through the skin surface, okay, because heat obviously is transported in the blood vessels. So if we can get the blood to leave the surface layers and go beneath the adipose tissue, the fat layers can be what's insulating us, making sure that we do stay that little bit warmer. We will stop sweating as well to make sure that we're not losing any water through that. Our hairs will stand up, causing goosebumps, as we might refer them to try and insulate us with air. And then we would also shiver sometimes as well. This is where your muscles will contract to generate extra heat, okay? So the movement of those muscles is going to try and generate extra heat within them to keep you warm. So there are a couple of situations that might arise if you go outside in cold conditions. For hot conditions, then it's mostly the opposite that will occur here. So whereas in cold condition, the blood left the surface and went beneath the fat tissue, it's actually going to stay towards the surface in this case. So more blood will flow close to the surface of the skin, so heat is lost by radiation. Your glands will release sweat, which is a weak salty solution, onto the surface of the skin, and this perspiration will cool the skin by taking away some of the body heat when it evaporates. This loss of water through sweat must be replaced though. That is why it's important to drink water before, during and after exercise to make sure that you're maintaining the balance of water and salts in the body, okay? That's why you might see some sports people take electrolytes as well, just making sure that they're maintaining that constant internal environment, bringing us right back to the idea of homeostasis and making sure that internal environment is constantly maintained. So we're going to have a look at a couple of exam questions then, and the first one here obviously associated with the skin. So we'll have a look at part 1 first of all. Which label structure is involved in vasoconstriction? So this is the arteriole, which in this diagram here is B. Describe in detail the role of vasoconstriction in temperature regulation. So we're going to talk about literally what we just seen there about hot and cold conditions. So we can mention first of all here in cold conditions, blood will move away from the surface of the skin and the blood vessels will narrow, or the arterioles if you want to be more specific. Okay, you could mention there about the hair erector muscle as well, but it does want us to focus here more on the role of B, so we'll actually leave that out. And then in hot conditions, blood flows closer to the skin. And more heat is lost through sweat. Okay, which label structure is involved in piloerection? So this is referring to the hair. So the hair in this case is A. Don't have to say anything more than that. Part 4, which labeled structure is involved in both excretion and temperature regulation? So this is going to be C. Now, as we know, C is the sweat gland. How is this involved in both temperature regulation and excretion? Well, temperature regulation done by the sweat gland is to release sweat. So sweating out is an example of excretion, and we sweat for temperature regulation to try and cool us down. So part 5, name the excretory product formed by the structure labelled at part 4 above. Okay, this is going to be sweat. So we knew it was the sweat gland. The excretory product is sweat. Next part then, we have part 6. Humans can generate their own heat and regulate their own body temperature. What name is given to such organisms? So we're endotherms. Okay, we produce the heat inside, endo meaning inside, whereas ectotherms have to get the heat from an outside source. Okay, we're endotherms. And then part 7, name 2 other systems in which the skin has a role. So it has a role in the nervous system as well. We mentioned that a couple of minutes ago about the sense receptors and how if we touch something we might pull back. So that's the nervous system. And we mentioned how it does have a protective role within our bodies as well. So this will be the human defense system as well. Okay, so it does actually try and stop pathogens from entering the body. So it will be involved in the defense system there as well. Okay, for the next couple of minutes, we're going to focus in on the urinary system because this is where the kidneys is going to come up. And the kidneys is going to be the main focus for the rest of this session. So the urinary system consists of the kidneys, the bladder, and some ducts. So we can see here we have our 2 kidneys. On top of the kidneys, we have our adrenal glands, which are responsible for producing the hormone adrenaline. And we do have these blood vessels as well. We have our renal artery and our renal vein. So if you ever see the word renal, that's anything referring to the kidney. Okay, our renal artery, renal vein. We have our bladder down here, and then we have our sphincter, which controls the release of urine, and our urethra, which is where it's going to pass through. Okay, just a couple of other things to keep an eye on here as well. We do have a urethra, which is the tube that connects the kidney down to the bladder, and our diaphragm is located above the kidneys. Okay, so the lungs obviously will be above that again. So just to kind of know where this is in relation to the human body, it's beneath the diaphragm. So the kidney then, if you were to get a kidney and slice down through it, so a section through the kidney will show an outer darker region known as the cortex, and you can see it in the diagram here. It's this region that follows around here. That's the cortex. And then the lighter inner zone, which is known as the medulla, and you can see this in here. The pelvis will be joined in here, and then this is the urethra, which we seen a couple of minutes ago, which is the tube that connects the kidney down to the bladder. Okay, that's this component here. Now, this, I suppose the proper scientific drawing of the kidney will be this, so exact same as what we seen on the last slide. This is just more the diagram associated with it. You have your outer darker region known as the cortex, that's in this entire region here. The inner lighter region known as the medulla. We do have our renal artery and our renal vein coming in here. You have your pelvis, you have the urethra again, which is the tube that connects the kidney down to the bladder. We do have these collecting ducts, which are going to be important for us in a couple of minutes when we look at the idea of excretion from the kidney. But just to know that there is collecting ducts there, and we do have tubules as well. And we're going to be focusing in on these internal structures in the next couple of minutes, just to know they're there for now, but this is the overall general structure. For now, really focus in on the darker layer, which is the cortex, and the lighter layer, which is the medulla. We'll get to the insides in a couple of minutes. Now, what does the kidney actually do for us? Well, the kidneys work by filtering the blood and then absorbing back what the body needs. This could be nutrients, this could be water. The wastes then are allowed to pass to the bladder for storage and for release. Okay, as urine is produced, it flows into the renal pelvis, then into the urethra, to the bladder. And we can see this here. This is where the pelvis was over here, flows down into the urethra, then down to the bladder, and eventually it can be released from the body. It's going to exit then through the urethra, and it's the sphincter muscle here which controls the opening and the closing of the urethra so that the urine can actually pass through. Okay, that's the function of the kidney. Now, what's the processes involved in the kidney? There's 2 main ones. We have filtration, we have reabsorption. So filtration is going to occur in the cortex, which is the outer darker region. So small molecules like glucose, amino acids, water, urea and salts, they will filter out of the blood into narrow tubules. Okay. Reabsorption then will take place, so blood vessels reabsorb back useful nutrients from the tubules. So there will be some nutrients that we will need to take back. This can happen then. Urea, excess salts and water will then not be reabsorbed. They will be allowed to pass down through the tubule and onto the bladder, and eventually they will be passed out of the body. Now, this reabsorption actually takes place in both regions. Some of it will take place in the cortex, some of it will take place in the medulla. But just to remember there for filtration, that only occurs in the cortex on the outside, whereas the reabsorption happens in both. Another process of the kidney then is secretion. So the production and release of chemicals from cells. Some substances, especially potassium and hydrogen ions, they're going to be secreted from the blood into the tubule in the cortex region. So again, we're focusing on the outer region here. When the blood will become too acidic, hydrogen ions are secreted into the urine, and then by controlling the hydrogen ion concentration in the blood, the kidneys can control blood pH. And this is exactly what we were saying earlier on about the excretory system and the idea of homeostasis. One of the things obviously is water regulation in the body. We want to do temperature regulation, but pH concentration is really important for us as well, because we do want to maintain mostly a neutral environment. We don't want it to be too acidic or too basic, because then we're not going to be able to function as optimally as we can. So we're going to focus on the nephron for the next couple of minutes, which is the structural and functional unit of the kidney, okay? And the kidney can be composed of many of these nephrons. Now, if we have a look at the diagram over here for a second, we're going to focus in on the renal artery, okay? The renal artery is coming in here, and we can see that it separates, okay? We're going to examine that in the next couple of minutes. So it's going to separate into different arterioles and then into a capillary network known as a glomerulus at the top of each nephron. Okay, and we can see that happening in here. You can see the kind of C-shaped structure which we have here. So that's the glomerulus in there. Okay, that kind of ball structure there highlighted in pink. And that's at the top of each nephron. So this could be a structural unit that we have here known as the nephron. Okay, normally ends in the collecting duct. So if we were to look at one nephron, I suppose in this case, it would be all the way from here over to about here. Okay, because it's going to end in the collecting duct. Okay, so this is the detailed structure of the nephron, and again, just like the diagram of the skin a couple of minutes ago, really important that we know this. So not only would you be asked to label this, you could be asked to actually draw this as well. Now, what's happening here? Well, we have our renal artery down here on the left-hand side. The blood is going to move in there, and we know it splits into different arterioles and capillaries. So we have our blood coming in here, down into this network of capillaries known as the glomerulus, and in here, this is where filtration is going to occur. We mentioned a couple of minutes ago that this takes place in the cortex out here. We can see Bowman's capsule, which is this structure here. We can see lots of them in the cortex in this diagram down here. Filtration is going to occur. So the blood that's coming in here is going to be filtered. Everything except blood cells and proteins will be filtered out into Bowman's capsule, this structure here. The blood and proteins will continue to move on then along the blood vessel the whole way over towards the collecting duct, over then to the renal vein. We'll come to that in a second. So just bear in mind, the blood is going to continue to go around the blood cells and the proteins. Everything else is filtered out into Bowman's capsule. Now, one thing just to keep an eye on here is the amount of twists and turns that occur the whole way along the nephron. Okay, we have one massively pronounced one down here, known as the loop of Henle. We'll come to that in a couple of minutes. But those loops are going to be really important for reabsorption. Okay, so if we have a look here, straight away after Bowman's capsule, we go the whole way down here. We have the proximal convoluted tubule. So proximal means close. Okay, this is the proximal convoluted tubule. It's the first turn after Bowman's capsule. We continue the whole way along, and then we finally get to the loop of Henle. Okay, up until this point here, reabsorption of all food will have occurred, roughly 7/8 of the water and roughly 7/8 of the salt. Okay, all of this is going to be reabsorbed. Where does this take place? Some of it is going to take place within the cortex. Some of it is going to take place within the medulla. Okay, that's where reabsorption occurs. Once we pass the loop of Henle, we're going to continue up here towards the distal convoluted tubule. So distal meaning distance or distant away. And then over here, just after the distal convoluted tubule, we can see that reabsorption of the remaining water can happen if ADH is present, antidiuretic hormone, which we'll come to in a couple of minutes. So if we need to reabsorb that remaining water, we will. It's not always going to be the case. And then following on from that, we're going to reach our collecting duct, and this is where the urine, urea, water, salt, toxins, that can be passed off to the bladder. And then we can see here that the blood vessel actually goes back to the renal vein. Okay, so that's the idea of the structure of the nephron. We have the blood coming in, filtration is going to occur here in Bowman's capsule. That's out here in the cortex. Everything is going to be passed around. Reabsorption will first occur then of all the food back into the bloodstream, water, salt. We'll continue then the loop of Henle over to the distal convoluted tubule, and if we need to, we will reabsorb that remaining water. Everything then will collect within inside the collecting duct, and anything that needs to be removed from the body will be removed. So we mentioned there about filtration. We're going to focus on that now for a couple of minutes, and then we look at the reabsorption. So the first thing that happens as we're coming in here, this portion here in the cortex, the renal artery will come in. It's going to divide into different afferent arterioles and then into a capillary network known as the glomerulus. Okay, and this is at the top of each nephron in the cortex. Okay, that's inside Bowman's capsule there, the glomerulus. A cup-shaped funnel, known as Bowman's capsule, surrounds each glomerulus, and it is here that smaller molecules in the blood are forced under pressure, because this is so narrow and it's coming at maybe such a high speed that it's forced out of the capillaries into Bowman's capsule. So they're forced out of the blood under pressure, out of the plasma and into the lumen of Bowman's capsule, forming the glomerular filtrate. The blood pressure is high because the efferent arteriole is narrower than the afferent arteriole, so force filtering the plasma. Everything except large proteins and blood cells will get filtered. Okay, everything is going to be filtered out here into Bowman's capsule. Reabsorption then, this can take place both in the cortex and the medulla, unlike the filtration which only happens in the cortex. So as the glomerular filtrate passes from Bowman's capsule into the proximal convoluted tubule, the first convoluted tubule, the nearest one, useful chemicals like glucose, amino acids, some salts and water are reabsorbed back into the blood. The food molecules, including most of the salt, are taken back by active transport, so there's a little bit of energy required to get them back into the bloodstream because this is going against the concentration gradient. Energy is needed for this. Most of the water will be reabsorbed by osmosis. Okay, osmosis being a passive process. It's the movement of water molecules from a high concentrated region to a low concentrated region through a semi-permeable membrane. Okay, and this is going to happen from the loop of Henle and the convoluted tubules. Okay, so again, the reabsorption of all food, roughly 7/8 of the water, roughly 7/8 of the salt, and then if we need to, remaining water will be reabsorbed over here towards the distal convoluted tubule. So this is one of the first structures we mentioned there a couple of minutes ago, the proximal convoluted tubule. This is where water is reabsorbed, okay, by osmosis. So again, just to mention what osmosis is, we have our semi-permeable membrane here. We have a region of high water concentration. We have a region of low water concentration. So it's the movement of water molecules from a region of high concentration to low concentration across the semi-permeable membrane there. Okay, so proximal tubing, it's only one cell thick. That makes it really easy for these molecules to move across this convoluted tubule. And there's a high concentration of mitochondria there as well, which is really important, okay, because mitochondria are going to supply energy. And if we do have to move things like nutrients and salts across this semi-permeable membrane, it can't be done without energy, okay, so some of that energy can be provided by the mitochondria. The loop of Henle then, this was the really pronounced dip that we seen in the nephron a couple of minutes ago. We have our descending limb and we have our ascending limb. So the descending limb is the one that's going down. The ascending limb is the one that's coming back up. Okay, so if we were to look at our loop of Henle here roughly, this will be your descending limb. And then this one here will be your ascending one because it's coming back up. Okay, so in the descending limb, this portion over here, this is where water will be reabsorbed through osmosis. And then the ascending limb over here, this is permeable to salts, and these salts can be moved across the membrane using active transport. Okay, it's against the gradient, so we do need a little bit of energy there, but there is lots of mitochondria around to provide some energy for that to happen. We then have our distal tubule, so this was the one that was further away from Bowman's capsule just before the collecting duct. This is responsible for the control of water, salt and pH values in our blood. So what does this absorb? Again, can absorb water through osmosis, and it can absorb salts through active transport, again needing a little bit of energy for the salts to be absorbed. The collecting duct, that's the structure then at the very, very end. This is responsible for the reabsorption of some water, very specific case where this will be done, which we'll come to in a couple of minutes. And then urine, this is liquid passing from the collecting duct, flows to the pelvis of the kidney and then onto the bladder for storage before it's eventually going to be released from our body. Okay, so anything that's going to be removed will be situated in the collecting duct and then can be removed from our body because it is a waste product. So just a really quick overview then of all the regions of the nephron and what they're responsible for. So we have our proximal convoluted tubule. This was the first one after Bowman's capsule. The substance that will be reabsorbed here will be most salts, glucose, amino acids, and so on. The amount of water, again, most of it is going to be reabsorbed there. Okay, roughly 7/8 will be reabsorbed around this particular region. We have the loop of Henle, the descending limb, so the first part going down. Some minerals are going to be reabsorbed, and a very small amount of water will be absorbed there as well. The ascending limb, the part coming back up, some salts will be reabsorbed there. Active transport will be needed in this case, so we will need some energy for that to happen. No water is going to be reabsorbed there. In the distal convoluted tubule, so this is the one before the collecting duct, some salts will be reabsorbed here. Again, we need a little bit of energy because it's going against the gradient, the concentration gradient, so it's done by active transport. Energy will be needed. And then for water, some water could potentially be reabsorbed here, but we'll look at the situation for that now in the next minute or so. And then in the collecting duct, there's no reabsorption done there. Some water could be reabsorbed there, and again, we'll get to that scenario now. So once we get to the collecting duct, we've reabsorbed what we needed to reabsorb back into our bloodstream. Anything else is a waste product and needs to be removed from our body. Okay, this is where the bladder is going to come in. So the bladder stores urine, which is removed from the body through the urethra, which is the structure down here. Urine is composed of roughly about 96% water, urea, salt, and then traces of other hormones as well. Now, how do we actually control the volume of urine? Okay, we mentioned a couple of minutes ago about how reabsorption of water can occur in this particular part of the nephron if this antidiuretic hormone is present. Okay, so ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, controls whether the distal tubule, so the one that's further away from Bowman's capsule, the one that's distant from Bowman's capsule, ADH controls whether the distal tubule and the collecting duct reabsorbs water or not. Okay, we mentioned a couple of minutes ago about how it is possible that water reabsorption is done, but it's not always the case. Now, what is the situation in which the ADH will make sure that we do reabsorb this water? It's if we drink too little water. Okay, so if we're not taking in enough water day by day ourselves through our diet or drinking water, then this ADH is going to make sure that we absorb the remaining 1/8 of the water over here towards the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. Now, this ADH, it is a hormone, okay, so it has to be produced by a gland. It's going to be produced by the hypothalamus gland. It's stored in the pituitary gland, and this is responsible for osmoregulation, okay? So osmoregulation, the control of water in our body, ADH is hugely responsible for that. Now, there is a chance where we won't reabsorb any water over here. So if you're getting enough water in every day through your diet and through drinking water, then we're not going to reabsorb the water over there. But if you're not taking in enough water, then that ADH is going to tell the distal convoluted tubule and tell the collecting duct we need to reabsorb that remaining 1/8 water to make sure that our cells are receiving enough water. Okay, there's enough water in our bloodstream. ADH responsible for that. Now, this is the situations that happen if you drink a great deal of water and if you're actually low on water. We'll go through it in more detail. So if you drink a great deal of water, okay, you're getting lots of water in through your food and just drinking water, the hypothalamus then will detect the diluted blood and it will turn off ADH production. Okay, this means over towards the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, we won't absorb that water. Okay, less water is reabsorbed, so more water is allowed to escape to the bladder and a larger volume of dilute urine is produced. Okay, so if you're drinking enough water, we don't have to reabsorb that last bit, and we can actually get rid of a little bit more as well because we have a great deal of water inside our body. But if your body is low on water, then the hypothalamus is going to detect this. It's going to turn on ADH production. So ADH is going to be secreted from the pituitary gland and more water will be reabsorbed, especially around the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct, and only a small volume of urine will be produced. Okay, so an exam question then based on the kidney and the nephron. The diagrams below are of a human kidney and one of its nephrons. PCT is the proximal convoluted tubule and DCT is the distal convoluted tubule. Part 1. The kidneys are located in the abdomen surrounded by a thick layer of fat. What is the function of this layer of fat? So for this, you could just say protection. You could also say insulation there as well if you want, but we'll just put down one word. So we put down protection. Identify the regions of the kidney labelled A, B, and C. Okay, so if we have a look up here at A, this is more towards the outside. That's the darker region that we looked at a couple of minutes ago. So A is the cortex. B is more towards the inside, so that's the medulla. And then C, the structure coming into the kidney, that's the pelvis. Part 3, identify the region in the kidney by name or label where the process of filtration occurs. So filtration occurs more towards the outside because that's where the Bowman's capsule is going to be. So that's in the cortex. You could also obviously say A there as well because they did say by name or by label. Part 4, explain the importance of blood entering the glomerulus under pressure. So what was really important for this a couple of minutes ago is that the components are force filtered. Okay, so force filtration, or you could say small molecules, are forced out of the blood. Part 5. State 2 reasons why there are many capillaries surrounding the proximal convoluted tubule, PCT, loop of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubule. So one of the reasons here will be for reabsorption. So we want to reabsorb as many nutrients, whatever we need, reabsorb as much as possible back into our bloodstream, but also for secretion as well. Okay, that was one of the other functions of the kidney we mentioned earlier on. Okay, part 6. It says, describe how ADH, antidiuretic hormone, affects the volume of urine. Okay, so we really have to focus in here on the volume. We'll give the situation which we seen a couple of minutes ago. If water intake is low, ADH is produced. Water will be reabsorbed, but the volume of urine will be low. And then if water intake is high, ADH is not produced, and extra water removed. So urine volume is high. Both situations there, and I'll actually have to do this last question up here towards the top. So it says urine collects at the region label C in the diagram of the kidney and travels on towards the bladder. Name the structure which urine travels to the bladder in. So this is part 7, and this is the urethra. Okay, not the urethra, don't get that confused. The urethra is what it actually leaves the body through. It's the urethra that connects the bladder and the kidney. So one more question here, very similar. What is meant by excretion? So very first part there, A part 1. It's the removal of waste products from the body. Part 2. Urea and carbon dioxide are excretory products of the human body. In the case of each product, name a substance from which it's derived. So we need to say a product from which urea derives and carbon dioxide as well. So urea can be derived from proteins, and carbon dioxide can actually be produced or broken down from carbohydrates. Okay, on to part B. B part 1. Name the parts labelled A, B, C, D, E and F. So we'll start off with A. A is the arteriole. B is Bowman's capsule. That's the cup shape. On to part C. That's the proximal convoluted tubule. D, we have the loop of Henle. E is the collecting duct over towards the end. And F is the distal tubule. It's the one that's further away from Bowman's capsule. Okay, on to part 2. From which blood vessel is A derived? Okay, that's the renal artery. That's the artery coming in. Renal because it's associated with the kidney. Part 3. Where in the kidney is B located? So B, this is where filtration occurs. It's more towards the outside. So this is the cortex. Part 4. Give the part of the nephron in each of the in which each of the following takes place. So filtration occurs in Bowman's capsule. That's the structure which we have up here. So 1 is Bowman's capsule. The absorption of amino acids takes place in the proximal tubule. Okay, I'll have to go back up for the last couple of questions here. Part 5. Give 2 features of the nephron that aid filtration. So one of these is the large surface area. All the loops are really important for that. So large surface area. The more surface area, the more that can be reabsorbed. And a second one there will be the thin walls. Okay, usually 1 cell thick, really, really important. Now we're obviously, I just mentioned 1 cell thick there. Just to be more explicit, you're obviously only asked for 2, so don't give any more than 2 on the exam, just in case you do make a mistake. But there is a rich capillary network there as well. So that would be 3 different ones that you could have used. Part 6. Name a group of biomolecules in the blood which are too large to pass through the filtration system of the nephron. This is going to be proteins. So we mentioned earlier on how up in Bowman's capsule, molecules are forced out, okay, under pressure, forced out of the blood into Bowman's capsule, but the blood itself and the proteins don't, because the proteins are too large. So just before we go today, I just want to draw your attention to the ExamRevision website, where you can access all of today's content and more for the Leaving Cert Biology syllabus. So when you go to examrevision.ie and log in, you can see here that not only do we have Leaving Cert Biology, but we actually have a wide range of Leaving Cert Biology or Leaving Cert subjects available for you to choose from. All of them are going to be laid out the exact same way. So we have video tutorials, quizzes, presentations, an exam builder and a resource pack. So for the video tutorials, this is going to be a wide range of videos to talk you through the entire syllabus for all of the subjects. So if we wanted to look at it from the biology point of view, we're going to look for the one we did today, which is in Unit 3. It's 3.4, which is within the breathing system and excretion. And we can see there we have a video on homeostasis. We have one on human breathing, which is part of this topic as well. We do have one there on the skin. We have one on the urinary system and the kidney, and then also the leaf, which is part of this topic. So you can click into whichever one of those videos you want. This particular video is going to talk you through the outline of the structure of the kidney, describe the structure of the nephron, and talk about filtration and reabsorption within the body as well. Okay, it does give you some related videos to tell you which ones you might possibly want to watch next. And there is the option to change the playback speed as well to make it a little bit slower or a little bit faster. When you've watched the videos, you do have the option for the MCQ quizzes. So this one here in the skin and the kidney, there's 10 questions. You choose whichever answer you want, press submit at the end of each one. And when you've answered all 10 questions in this case, you'll get a score out of 10. You'll find out exactly which ones you got correct and exactly which ones you got incorrect, but the correct answer will be provided for you so that you can learn from it and try the quiz again. Down here, we do have our exam builder as well. So we can click in here. All of the past Leaving Cert Biology exam questions and mock exam questions will be located here. So you just press on the plus button beside which ones you want to add, go back up here to the top, and you can download the questions and the answers. We do have PowerPoint presentations as well, which you can click into for some extra notes. And then most importantly, we do have our resource pack there as well. So this is a collection of H1 notes for all content associated with Leaving Cert Biology. So you can click in, print these off, write on them, whatever you want, but they're available for all parts of the Leaving Cert Biology syllabus. So make sure and go to examrevision.ie to see all of the content available to you. Details will be posted there about all of the upcoming revision courses, which you might want to sign up for as well. Thanks again for coming to today's Saturday session, and I hope to see you at one again soon.